Okay, so I just received this bike from a customer who obviously you can see here has a broken chain. That's definitely and it definitely broke because I can see the piece actually broke off here, one of the links. But what I typically like to do is I like to do an inspection of the bike to kind of see how, see if there's anything else in it, like basically a health check. Just kind of run through a menu of things that I check to make sure, like a checklist, to see what's going on. So as you can see, there's a little bit of duct tape here. So apparently this person's not able to shift very well. You can see it goes back here, but there's no movement here whatsoever. So whatever is going on here, the shifter works here, but as you can see, there's just movement here. So I'm sure that the cable's either broken or the housing, or something wrong with the housing. So that's one thing I can spot here. I can see a little bit of rust going on here, and just looking at this to see how it rotates, it seems to be rotating pretty well here. Not too bad. Let's go back and check the brake. So this is the front brake, and the front brake seems to be okay. But as I'm looking at that brake lever itself, it seems to be twisted, so it may have been banged or something like that. So it's banged up away from this. And other than that, that doesn't look too bad. The bike rotates freely, so doesn't seem to be any headset issues. It seems to be okay there. And obviously with the brake off, with the chain off, then I can rotate the crank, and it seems to be sticking a little bit. It's sticking in one spot, and it's breaking free. So there might be some there might be some dirt in there that's causing it to bind a little bit. And up here doesn't seem to be much of a problem here. Brake does seem to have been shifted a little bit. So if I test the brake here, it's a little bit slow on the return. Again, probably just the age, as well as if you look here, you can see that this handle, the other one is turned out turned up. This was turned in. So again, there's probably it's been through a couple bangs and stuff like that. And of course, because the chain is missing, then of course I have no idea what the situation is down here with respect to the rear derailleur, or if this is okay. It seems to be okay here, but I can see that the chain protector, the spoke protector here is loose, and it's just kind of wobbly there. It's a really heavy bike as well, because this is a steel frame, and with this bike rack on the back to hold no doubt some stuff, because this is primary transportation for this guy. Well, another thing I can see here is I can see that the kickstand is broken, so that's another thing. The wheel, the tire itself, as you can see, there's definitely some problems here. There's a little bit of a tear, and you can see there's a lot of cracking on the tire itself. So this is going to need this probably need to be fixed at this time. It's really dirty as well, and I'm not trying to necessarily say anything about the guy the owner of the bike. Is probably because, again, he doesn't have the time to spend and fixing stuff. I can see there's a missing screw for the back fender. Fender's pretty beat up as well, no doubt been through quite a bit of use or possibly abuse, but regardless. And just looking at this thing down now, look closer, it looks like the front tire has been replaced relatively recently, so not too bad. This actually does look pretty good. We'll just have to concentrate on the back tire to make sure that's good. Again, a little bit of rust in here, as you can see on the inside of the fender brace. Again, that's to be expected. It has some nice Tektro brakes, which I am impressed to see. I do like to see that kind of stuff, as well as a Shimano Tourney rear derailleur, which is nice. It does not have a front derailleur, so I'm not expecting to see anything here. Other than that, it seems to be, in good working order. Now it's just a matter of taking it apart and seeing what needs to be done to fix some of these issues that we have here.
So the first thing I did was look at the chain, and as you can tell, it split right at the pin and right in the center of the link on both sides. So it was definitely not good. From there, I started in on removing the panniers and the back bike rack to give myself a little bit more room to go ahead and start to inspect the bike a little bit closer and identify any things that needed to be done. I removed the back wheel and then removed the chain guard for the crank. Once done with that, I actually started to inspect the rear fender and thought it would be an easy fix to kind of clean up some of the dents that were in the fender.
Okay, so I was able to take out a lot of the dents in here, but again, it's marred and scratched up. There's not a whole lot I can do about that. And it's also missing a screw over on this side. I'll just replace that with a button, a screw and nut, a bolt nut. And so anyway, but this is something I can see that's it's just obviously through use and stuff like that. Not a whole lot I can do, but I did take out a lot of the dents that were right here. There's some dents across here, no doubt. Something had come down and hit it here a couple times. So anyway, that's looking much better, and I think this is going to, at least it'll continue to be as is. Looking now at this thing here, I was able to look at this crank here, and you see as it rotates okay, seems to rotate okay, but it catches at certain spots like that. It shouldn't catch like that. This should rotate around relatively easily all the way around. As you can see, it rotates to an extent, and then it stops, and that's what I don't like. That's something that's not good. So anyway, a good repack of the bearings inside here will be a quick fix, and then we'll go ahead and put on a new chain. Looking at the teeth, they do not seem to be too bad, so this doesn't seem to be a big issue. So a new chain will probably be okay. As well as looking at some of the pulleys down here now, I'm seeing that they're pretty clean. And going over to the, you can see here now that I have this off, just dirty. That's all it is. Just there's not a significant amount of use and wear and tear on here. So I think this is actually looking pretty good as well. Okay, so now that I've got this bike up and I'm kind of looking at it, this is the second glance, I'm seeing that the headset, actually I was thinking the headset was moving really smoothly. Yes, well, a little bit too smoothly actually, because I've got some play in the headset, so I'm gonna have to I'll have to tighten this up as well to make sure that this doesn't cause any problems, and also depending on how long it's been riding with this the way it is, you could have been damaging certain pieces, the races, the bearings themselves, inside the headset, either the top or bottom, either one, and that is obviously not going to be good. So I'll have to check into that as well. I'm still looking at this and not liking the crank, so I'll take the crank out, repack the bearing. Also, just check everything, make sure that all the pieces are clean. There's no grittiness. The bearings haven't been chewed up, and they still have the chrome finish. Basically the finish they have for the hard seal. So that's what I'm going to do now. But it looks like so far what I'm looking at is I'm not seeing it's too bad. It's just been used a little bit, and just needs some TLC just to be able to keep it kind of clean and make sure that it continues to run the way it should. Because most bikes will, if you just give it a little bit of maintenance, they can be ridden for decades, really. Okay.
So the first thing I worked on was the crank, and of course, as always, I love working on these one-piece cranks. I will never get tired of saying that. So once I removed the opposite side race and bearings, I looked at them, and actually they didn't look that bad. I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of stuff, but the factory grease actually looked really good. It was not dry. As well as it was not, there wasn't chewed up or anything like that. So I simply went ahead and just dumped the bearings into some solid, let them kind of percolate a bit, and then cleaned the crank itself with some steel wool. Went ahead and grabbed those bearings and repacked those, cleaned the bearing cups, put it all back together with the bearing race and the washer and the lock nut, and once I had that all together, just tightened it up and it was done. So not too bad at all. So I like that. I like the movement. So when I put on the pedal, I was able to kind of give it a real movement, and then I could see that there was no binding anymore, and it was definitely looking good. So next I moved on to the headset and handlebars, and went ahead and removed the quill stem just took it off the side, dropped it down. I didn't really want to take it all apart, it just hung on the side. And I went ahead and held the fork in place with a bungee cord and just released a little bit to go ahead and add the grease where I could see. I mean, it all looked good. It wasn't too bad. I could see that it looked like it just loosened up a little bit. But since I already had it apart, might as well add some lubrication as well. So from there, I went ahead and added just tightened it up, made sure that it was moving correctly. Went ahead and put the quill stem back in, tightened that up. Then I moved on to the brake levers, and as you can see, I started using a hammer and it was not very effective. So I went ahead and used the PVC pipe to kind of grab it better, and that's a nice little bike hack there. It was much easier to do it that way. And I looked at the handlebar grips, and the one for the shifter was not that good, so I figured I'd just take it off. I'll take care of that later anyway, because I have to probably take off the shifter. Then I was really curious to see what was really happening with that duct tape. I want to know what it was hiding, so I went ahead and cut that off. And sure enough, it was pretty much as I expected. The housing had pretty much frayed, and it was not doing what it should have done. So I then started in on the rear wheel, and of course I had to remove my rear sprocket, and as always I use my PVC pipe for that as well. It's great for taking it off. And went ahead and tossed that into some solvent. Went ahead and got the wheel set up as well. Went to cleaning that sprocket, getting all the junk off of that, and it cleaned up really good. So next I started in on the rear wheel and started to remove the axle and the bearing cones, bearings themselves. Start to remove it, inspect it, just confirm that everything looked good. I went ahead and let the bearing and most of the interior stuff just kind of percolate a little bit, just to soak. And went ahead and started to clean the actual wheel itself, cleaning up the rim, the bearing cups, some of the spokes a little bit. Then I went back into looking at the actual bearings themselves, the cones, just now that they've been sitting in solvent a little bit, and just clean those up as well. Get those looking better, and inspecting them, and just looking more than anything for any of the bearings that were chewed up, that had been removed. Counted them as well, just made sure they have the right number. Then I started in on the greasing and just getting the cups with some grease in there, and individually put in each one of the bearings, 9 on one side, 9 on the other, 1/4 inch bearings. And then once I got those in there, I started in with the greasing of the dust cover on the axle. I usually don't take off both. I usually just take off one, because then I can just feed it through without losing my position on the axle for those bearing cones. And then went ahead and put the grease on the opposite side as well, and then put the axle in just to hold the bearings on the opposite side in place so they didn't fall out, and went ahead and added the bearings on the opposite side as well. So once I did that, I went ahead and threaded on the bearing cone, put on the spacer, add the lock nut, and tighten those down pretty tight, and then back it off just enough to make sure that I had some free movement on those on the axle, so it was not binding. From there I went ahead and put on the sprocket, tightened that down with the chain whip. It's not really necessary because you ride your bike and it's going to tighten it automatically by itself. And then went ahead and looked at the new tube, the new tire. So I was able to obviously took it apart. New tires are always fun to put on because they're not really formed or shaped to the size, the actual rim itself. So it does take a little bit of work, and I will usually leave my tube partially inflated so that I make sure that it's not twisted or it doesn't have any creases for the most part, and then I will slowly let out the air once I have it inside the tire itself. So once I have it on there, you know, feed the bead on one side. Once I have the beads on one side of the rim, then I will go in and start to feed the actual partially inflated tube inside the rim itself, and then feed on, you know, just and then start to work on the rest of the bead itself for the opposite side. Once it's on there, of course, just inflate it, check to see if there's no issues. I mean, I should hear a couple popping sounds, because that's where it means it's seating correctly on the bead on that rim. And then once I did that, looked at it just to confirm that the trueness was looking pretty good. It was a little bit off, so I said, well, not a problem. I'll just go ahead and true it up on my truing stand. Went back in, did a quick check on the truing stand. Tightened up a couple places. It was a little bad, but overall it was not too much. It actually was running pretty smooth, of course, and I'm always inspecting it, the actual rotation, to make sure that's good as well. I don't want to have too much rotation or wobble. I want to make sure that it's still running smoothly, but at the same time not binding. So next I went ahead and grabbed a new chain, because obviously the old broken one, there was no hope for it. Plus the fact, as you can see, as I'm running it down here, it would stretch anyway, so it didn't make much difference. I did not want to try to use it. So next I started in on the rear derailleur and cleaned up the directional pulleys there. Again, it wasn't too bad. I didn't think I had to take it off the bike. I thought the rear derailleur would be easy just to service it right on top, so I didn't have to really uninstall the whole thing. I went ahead and took off the shifter, took off the cover plate, then went ahead and removed the old derailleur cable, which of course was they rust easily and they need to be replaced quite often. Went ahead and put the new cable back in, and after struggling a little bit, I was able to get it in there and was checking the length and realized I probably had bought or put in a front derailleur cable rather than the rear derailleur cable. So I went back into my box of stuff, grabbed out one that was long enough, and went ahead and fed that into the shifter. Once I had the cable then fed through, again, pretty easy stuff. Put it back on, put the cover plate back on as well. I don't need to do anything more there, just basically set it up for use there. And then once I had that set up and tightened on to the handlebar, I went ahead and cut a new length for the cable housing. Of course, that was bad. Definitely had to replace that. So regardless, I had to replace the cable as well as the cable housing, because there was just too much going on. And was able to include that, fed that in there. As always, I like to lubricate my cables just with a little bit of grease, so that it usually protects it from rusting, as well as giving it a little bit more of, you know, an easier shifting experience. It's always nice. So once I fed that through, I went ahead and hooked that back up with the rear housing that hooks up directly to the actual rear derailleur itself, and went ahead and fed that through and connected that up to the actual rear derailleur itself. And once I tightened that up, I was pretty much done. So next on my list was to install the new chain. And now that I had the rear derailleur kind of cleaned up and the cable connected, now I was able to connect those up as well. Just want to make sure I checked my length, and so I had my chain breaker. Wanted to cut it to length. I usually like putting on the small gear and checking for the least amount, or on the biggest one, and check to see what is the shortest amount of length that I need to reach the top level. Since this didn't have a front derailleur, so it's much easier to handle the back end since there's not a whole lot going on. So the last steps were to put the bike panniers back on, bike rack, make sure that was all set up. I had to actually take off the back wheel nuts just to get it back on there, and then I went ahead and added the chain guard.
Okay, so to summarize what I did on the bike, obviously I had to replace the chain and the rear wheel, the tire. That tire was it was bad. It looked like he had hit a curb or something like that. Some guy, and had actually, because the tire wasn't tracking already, it actually broke pieces of the sidewall, and so obviously had to replace that. Also went ahead and took out some of the dents on the back fender, straightened it up a little bit, and one of the screws was actually loose on the far side, so I had to tighten that up and make sure it was kind of aligned so that it wasn't rubbing on the side of the tire or anything like that. That's another thing. Also went ahead and repacked the bearings on the crank as well as on the rear wheel, so was able to repack the bearings on those two. Cleaned the sprocket, the freewheel. It was a little dirty, had some accumulated rust, you know, just obviously with time and with usage. So cleaned that up a little bit. Cleaned up the rear derailleur a little bit as well, just to make sure that the pulleys were clean and didn't have a bunch of junk on them. And so that was that. Obviously replaced the cable housing here for the rear derailleur. Replaced the cable itself. You know, adjusted it to make sure that it was running true, and that it was actually shifting to all of the gears, as well as the stops were set correctly, so it wouldn't jump off either way. The other thing was obviously that I was able to straighten out the brake levers a little bit. Both the brake levers are now a little straighter now. Adjusted the front of the handlebar was shifted over just a little bit, so I kind of centered that correctly. Took out the quill stem, kind of cleaned that up a little bit inside there. Somewhat repacked the bearings on the headset. More than anything, just adjusted it. Confirmed that the brakes were running true as well, that they were grabbing correctly. Didn't seem to be too bad, so I left them alone. And just the front wheel, I didn't do hardly anything on it. So basically, I replaced the grip here as well, because the grip's really chewed up, and just made sure that everything was kind of clean on the inside here. So that's pretty much all I did. So it wasn't a whole lot of work, but now obviously it moves just like I would expect it to. Very smooth on the crank, obviously, because the crank now there's no grabbing. The back wheel was binding. That was a little bit of a problem, because it was binding there and not letting it rotate correctly. Now it rotates very, very smoothly. I will admit, this cage in the back, this thing weighs like a ton. It adds like a good 2 pounds to 3 pounds on this bike, to the point where it makes it really heavy. But it's a steel frame bike. I mean, it'll take the weight, but it's just an additional weight of things that maybe are not needed. Maybe he could get away with just like a baby bike rack if he needed, without having the panniers to hold things. Again, I don't know what his job is, or because this was his main mode of transportation. So that's why when the chain broke, that was obviously, it was catastrophic failure. We had to fix that, but there were several other things that needed to be just maintenance on the bike that needed to be done because of, you know, lack of time or whatever the situation may be. So I just took care of it. Now the thing runs great. Where I would expect to see a bike. Okay, so again, hopefully he'll be able to use this thing in the future for couple years at least, you know, before we'd have to maybe do something similar to it again. Nice thing, again, I will always say, I love working with these one-piece cranks because they are so easy to disassemble, easy to service, to repack the bearings, and then they just run forever, because the hardened steel it is practically indestructible, and it is always easy to repack. But again, that is not the way the cycling community has gone. They try to get away from that as much as they possibly can because of sealed bearings. They're trying to maintain some, because obviously when a sealed bearing goes out, for the most part, you can't service it. You toss it, you buy a new one, and that's exactly what they want. They want something disposable instead of something that can be serviced. So, if you like this video, thumbs up, subscribe, share, leave a comment, and there will be many more like this in the future. Until then.